Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
I can. Yep. You just went silent for a minute, but you're back.
So sorry. Hi.
Hi. I have to not forget to ask you
What?
I was reading your bio and it said, and where it says slow reading
Yes.
and writing with a glass of wine.
And
Tell me
writing.
about slow reading.
Yeah. Um, that's something I picked up in graduate school, and it's just about taking your time. I think that I used to, well, coming from graduate studies, I never had the opportunity to slow read, to really take my time and digest paragraphs and chapters. And so
Okay.
now I'm not in a rush to finish a book. I want to take my time with it. I want to sit and sip like each sentence. So that's what it's about.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So do
It's
you do that with fiction as well, or?
I don't read fiction.
Okay. Okay. No
I'm working
time.
on it. I'm working.
Okay.
I need to get back into it, but yeah, right now I read pretty heavy text at this moment. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, if you need some
Okay.
suggestions for fiction, I have a million.
I would love that.
So thank you so much for doing this with me tonight. I was saying before I added you on that I've actually had you in mind since before I even started this, when we met a couple of years ago. I was just very taken with you and your message and the way that you delivered it. And then I've seen you a few times on Instagram Lives, and I was just like, this is, you embody really a disruptor and someone who is doing something very difficult with such grace, and very articulately. And so I'm so thrilled that you're here. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's get started. So what does disruption mean to you?
Yeah. I love this question that you ask all of your guests, Kate, because it can never be an either or. Like it can never be a binary. And I hate binaries. So thank you. And disruption, like, which is to say to be disruptive, can be enacted or embodied in so many different ways. And I think that manyness matters to me.
Mm,
So for me, I think firstly, disruption has always meant refusal. And I think that it's important for me to locate where that disruption comes from, which is always in through because of Black liberation efforts, and has always been intimately tied to Indigenous sovereignty practices in settler colonial nation states like Canada. So I think that's important to locate it there. And so for me, if disruption is refusal, then perhaps we can also say it is a modality of liberation or for liberation. So, and a key component that for me that has come through is disruption as a modality to arrive at a practice or at the practice of thinking for oneself.
yeah.
Right. So, and what I mean by that is I think like people living in so-called Canada under the structures of white supremacy and racial capitalism are really deeply entangled in the matrix that those structures created. And I think that thinking for oneself is actually one fundamental step, right? Um, to disrupting the hegemonic systems that want so badly. I really do. Like they want us so badly to stay uncritical,
Yeah.
unaware, uncurious,
Yeah.
really, right? So I think that in order to think for oneself, like the prerequisite to that is to know yourself deeply. And I don't think personally there is anything more disruptive than that,
I agree.
right?
I totally agree with that. And that is, in its essence, the like looking into yourself and
Right.
making change. And yeah, it is disruptive to question
It has to be.
yourself and the way we move around in the world. So would you have considered yourself a disruptor always?
I mean, if my mother's on here, she would say yes.
Okay.
And I don't think she's wrong. I think that disruption and the meanings and feelings that I have attached to it have been iterative and evolving. And so I think that there were also constantly many selves simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I think that I had met my disruptor self probably many times in my childhood and in my young adult life, but it wasn't maybe necessarily like the dominant self that I brought to every space and every situation. Right?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think, thank you. And I think that, like, so in my personal journey of becoming more myself and becoming more in my body, that has actually invited me to get to know my disruptor self and create a home for her.
Yeah.
And I guess this is to say again that disruption, like as an ethos, as a way of life, if we want to say that, can be thought of then for me, like as an evolving process, coming home to yourself.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And exactly what you said. I love that because I think it's in all of us.
That's
It is
right.
one of our many selves, and it is in coming to know those selves that it comes forward, that it can come forward.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I really like, it feels really good for me to know that I am not just one thing. You know, that there are so many selves that I bring to spaces, and one is my disruptor self, and I can hold her and love her and care for her the way that is needed, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Yeah. So tell me about, you have put together an anti-racist guide for white people, an ongoing starter guide to doing the work. So tell me about this.
Yeah, you know, when you sent me this question, I was like, damn, I haven't looked at this in so long. And in all honesty, it's a bit of an uncomfortable process, I think, looking back at that, because I am, like, in every single way, a different person than I was when I wrote that guide.
Okay. Tell me about that.
I just think like last year just cracked me all the way open. And I think that, I think that I was in a very particular space. So for context, so when I was writing that guide, I was like a month or so in writing my final research for my master's. And I know Danny's on the call here. She was my roommate, and she knows, like, it was not going as planned. Like, it never goes as planned. Okay. So I was like already kind of anxious. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then I think that it must have been within the week or the week of that Mr. George Floyd was murdered by the colonial nation state, which is to say murdered by the police, and the police is as an expression or artifact of the colonial nation state. And like so many others, I was feeling so many things at that time. And I was looking around to those that I was, you know, in relation to or in community with, and there was like a whole lot of silence. And I was like, I know that silence. I know that silence because I'm white. And I know that silence because I know that it comes from white supremacy. And that's really disturbing to me. And I was so unsettled. So I did what I knew I could do and that I had access to, right? I think access is a really important point for me to make, because I was in graduate school and I was reading all of these texts. And so I had pulled together what I was reading, what I had read in the year. I did really fast research that I knew that I could really do. Probably, honestly, within 48 hours, I had it up. And, you know, I looked at the different research that I had already done and others had done. And I wanted to come together with something that I could, you know, honor the labor, firstly, from those that did and always do and always have done all of the work right there, which is largely Black, Indigenous, and people of color scholars particularly, and they have already given us the tools to learn and to understand. It's always been there. So I just pulled it together kind of frantically in a frenzy, and then I just released it, like figuratively and literally. So so I think those were bringing up some feelings. Like I was remembering what it was like to release that kind of work out there. And yeah, I guess for like continued context in that time, I mean, we could all remember, we all lived through that. But I was hearing a lot of the, like, I don't know, I'm not educated in this area. I'm not well versed by white people. And, which was not shocking, right? Like none of that was shocking. I think that anybody, with my kind of education or not, but just has a broad understanding of whiteness, like this is how whiteness functions, right? That's actually a very integral part of the project. And yeah, so I guess this guide was always meant to be like a small gesture to my community and those in proximity to me to pay a different kind of attention and to get curious enough about themselves to change. You know, one scholar that really inspires me right now is Jenny Odell. And she tells us that what we choose to see, which is to say what we choose to look at, forms the basis of how we can act. And so what we see then also depends on how we look and for how long. And so it was my intention, I think, that with this guide that, and it's one of many that exists, obviously. There's so many guides, so many amazing resources were pulled together in that time last year. Like, it's really, truly incredible to think about. But it would perhaps invite those to look at what has always been. And it would perhaps invite them to look at it urgently.
Yeah, it's not new. It's not a new thing. And one thing that really struck me, and you just mentioned it as well, this guide that you pulled together, it is robust and it probably is small in the scheme of what actually exists out there, because people have been doing this work. These issues have existed and been kind of brushed aside and silenced. And I do know that feeling too, that kind of collective frozenness of white people to the overwhelm. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. I don't know. Yeah. And this guide is, it feels like access and a starting point to know where to go to start off with, if you need somewhere to start, or if you're anywhere on the learning.
That's right. Yeah. And I had that in mind. That is really what I had in mind, actually. I wanted it to be, if nothing at all, I wanted it to be one, small piece in the bridge to bring together those that were committed or wanted to be committed to divesting and dismantling the structures of white supremacy, right? With the shared anti-colonial desire to create more lovable and more livable worlds. That's who I find, really.
And did you encounter any roadblocks or challenges when you were putting this together? You said you were doing your, was it your thesis?
Yeah. That was put on pause for this time, if I recall correctly. But, I think that pulling together was relatively easy, because like I said, I had all the resources. I read like 90% of the text that I put on the guide. So that wasn't per se like challenging, but the challenges came after I put it out. And what I mean by that is, I think I had a big reckoning, to reconcile with trying to understand the root of white people's lack of urgency to get curious about themselves, about their conditioning. A few white people talk to me about the fear, which, yeah. And a few white people also talk to me about, the complexity and the situation. And, I think that we're seeing this play out today, right? With the ongoing genocide of Palestinian people by the settler colonial nation state of Israel. Also not new. And so rooted in the same place, right? Like supremacy. So these parallels are important, but that's not complex. And so that's really what I was trying to come to terms with, was the ways that complexity was being misused and displaced. What's complex, perhaps, that I figured out in my writing my thesis, is the insidious ways that whiteness lives and breathes within our subconscious minds, and how we unravel ourselves from its grasp. Like that's complex. Yeah. Because that's the root. And uprooting is complex, right? So that was challenging. And I think another sort of challenge that I faced in the aftermath of releasing that was within myself, in that I too had so much work to undergo. And that's the thing with anti-racism, is that it is a practice of unbecoming and unlearning, which is never complete.
Forever. That's what I was going to say. It goes forever.
Right. And so that requires an ongoing state of encounter with ourselves and with the structures in which we live in. So we've never arrived.
And it's a commitment to be uncomfortable and disruptive of what, like you say, whiteness, the comfortable state of just being frozen and being stuck in that space. And you're frozen. Oh, there you are. You're back. It really pushes you to be committed to disrupt those things, and that is a commitment that people willing to make that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
So what was the thing that sort of pushed you to keep going on this topic and keep going with it?
I don't actually think there's an option.
Yeah.
Because I actually don't, because this is not just a topic, right? This is about dismantling the structures that enact perpetual violence, and it is also about actively creating something completely otherwise. Like, so in that way, Kate, like I do position it as life or death, and I choose life. That's a choice I make. I choose the livingness of all humans and non-humans, and that comes with deep responsibility that I don't take lightly.
What drives that? What's behind that? So it's kind of the same, like it's sort of connected. What drives you to do this work?
Well, I think that, in a simple way, like, I personally feel that the structures that uphold, the systems in our society are literally, completely, utterly unacceptable, because they're literally unlivable. Full stop. And so it feels important to me to participate in the world I'm a part of in such a way where I offer some kind of tool for collective and collaborative survival, because that's actually what matters to me. So I think that's what drives me. Is the complete unacceptance that this is the only reality that could be. I refuse. I refuse that. Yeah. And then I think what I also want to be a part of part of a different conversation. And my good friend is on here, Erica. And so we talk often about this. But I think that we need to start having a different kind of conversation, a different entry point, right? Regarding racism, our participation as white women specifically in racism,
Mm-hmm.
and also our participation in anti-racism as a practice. And I think we get stuck in these like I am definitive statements that are also most times defensive. You know, I am anti-racist because of like XYZ performative thing in like July 2020.
Yeah.
Or what the fuck it is. I think like in you and I talked about this, Kate, I think that a lot of white people generally have a basic understanding that white supremacy is fucked up.
Yeah.
And it informs their daily lives, and divesting from white supremacy makes sense. I think we're there generally. So you said willingness. And so I think that that's the entry point for me. I think that I would like us to start getting curious about our own willingness. I think we need to have a conversation about what are we willing to do? What are we willing to give up? Who and what are we willing to unbecome to align ourselves with anti-colonial future building, right?
We have had the luxury of the comfort of being able to ignore it.
That's
and
right.
We need to be, like any change that happens at the very base level, uncomfortable. And as white people, we have been allowed to be ignoring it and be comfortable and not dealing with it, but that's not acceptable.
Right. Right. And so I think this piece about willingness for me feels open versus closed. I think conversations right now are closed and we're getting stuck. We talked about that, specifically white women. And I think what feels open about willingness for me is that I think when we get to a place where we are understanding our own willingness, we can then have a conversation about embodiment, about anti-racism as an embodied practice. For me right now, there's too big of a gap to even have that conversation with white people about like the continuous divestment from whiteness as an embodied practice, because I don't think that many people have met themselves deeply enough to ask themselves the fundamental question of what and who am I willing to unbecome in order to live out my values and show up in the worlds I'm a part of that are in alignment with my highest desires.
Because it's uncomfortable, it's disruptive. It's not like, oh, I don't get to sit in the space of
just be.
It takes work, it takes effort.
Yeah.
And we as fundamentally, for some reason, don't like being uncomfortable, don't like being in that space. And that is imperative. Yeah.
And I think that is the ways that white supremacy informs our lives. That's the ways that it comes through. It tells us we can't be new at something. We not know something. We have to be authorized knowers, and we have to show up, and we have to show off.
Yeah.
Performative inherently.
Yeah. And we have the right to be comfortable. Who the fuck gave us the right to be comfortable when so many others never have that and will never have that luxury? So it takes a real reflectiveness and looking. So I mean, we could talk about this for 1,000 years.
Yes.
So I want to ask you, if you had one piece of advice or pieces of advice to give white people, advice about how to do the work, someone who wants to do the work, they don't know where to start, what to do, how do I make a difference? It's overwhelming. I'm scared. I don't want to say the wrong thing, whatever. What would you say to them? What advice would you give to them? It's so massive. It's such a massive question. I know.
So massive. I'll have to return perhaps on a different platform and we can have this conversation for another time. But I mean, I think the question about I don't know where to start, I think it's actually a question of I don't know where to start within me.
Yeah.
And I really think that we need to locate it within ourselves. I don't know where to start within me. And so if that's the question, which I think it should be, then I would say start within the places in yourself that hold points of tension, the places that you look away from.
Yeah.
Like, I would tell you to tend to those places with care and get curious about those parts of you that likely do hold racist and colonial ideologies. Because we have lived in this system.
Yeah.
And we have absorbed this system.
Yeah.
And so to be clear, we will always be implicated, tied into, woven into processes of harm, and we will contribute to harm. We will. We're not outside of that. And it is actually narcissistic to think that we are.
Yeah.
We're not outside of that. So I think that's a good place to also start, like a non-innocent. I am not innocent in this thing because I'm a which means I have harmed, I will do harm again. So I have to be comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah.
And then I would say, like, tending to those places that you think are too shameful or that you look away from, tending to those places and getting curious to those places within you is actually where the uprooting happens. Like, uprooting all of the ways that white supremacy has integrated itself into the body and minds, and then pulling it out, and then filling those places with something different. Like, that's what I think is also the work of uprooting and also the work of white people.
And start looking at yourself. Start looking. Don't go out asking for other people to give you the answers. Start looking. Because it's all there.
It's all there. And if we believe that we are many selves, then we have to get to know the many selves, right? So, and then I guess the last thing I would tell them is, like, cracking open, which is often the effect of becoming and unbecoming, feels like breaking. Yeah. And it's okay to feel afraid and joyful. It's okay to feel both grief and excitement. And then I guess I would just tell them to do it anyways. Yeah. Just do it anyways.
Yeah. And what would you say to someone that said, I'm afraid to say the wrong thing?
I mean, of course you're afraid. That's what I would say. First of all, of course you're afraid. Because that's what white supremacy has told you. And so I'm afraid too. So I would validate that. But then I would tell them, I guess, like, what's on the other side of perfectionism is authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And nothing can really, truly, I don't believe this, nothing can really happen until our authentic selves are integrated. And so, and then I would return actually to the question or the conversation of willingness, right? Like, how willing are you to stay committed to the colonial impulse of perfectionism? And then I would ask you, how does perfectionism feel in your body?
Terrible.
Always know. It feels like shit. Because it's supposed to be there. Yeah.
And vulnerability and authenticity are so tied, and you will say the wrong thing. That's a guarantee. Like you said, it's in us.
Guaranteed.
You will say the wrong thing, but I truly do feel if your intentions, if you're not, maybe not even your intentions, if your desire to be committed and to do the work and to be better and to actually do better when you fuck up, that shows to someone, to other people. And even if someone says, I hate what you said, whatever, I don't want to be in your life or whatever anymore, your desire to create change and to be changed, that is on you. So your other people aren't there to make you feel comfortable. And if you make a mistake and you say the wrong thing and someone doesn't want to be, around you anymore or whatever that is, that's their choice. It's on you to not do that again.
That's right. Yeah, that's totally it. And
Yeah.
I think as a final point, Kate, I think that from talking with a lot of white people that say that kind of are committed rather to that kind of dialogue, I think that they're fearful of the uncomfortability of talking about the stuff of anti-racism.
Yeah.
And I think that one truth is that everything is uncomfortable when you're new. And part of it, because anti-racism is a practice, so you actually have to practice it. Mm-hmm. So I promise you, if you get into conversation with people and you start to talk about the stuff of anti-racism, over time, you're going to get more comfortable. Mm-hmm. So if you're just paralyzed and you're not going to talk about it, well, we can't change what we can't talk about. And
my God.
Right?
Yeah.
Can't change what we can't talk about. So you have to find a way through the fear to talk about it, because it's a practice and it's only going to get better with time. I think people look at me and think I have just fucking woke up I have 6 years of education and being in really uncomfortable spaces, being called out in classroom spaces, doing harm to people I love. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really important, is start talking.
Yeah.
Start practicing, start learning.
Thank you. I love what you said. We can't change what we can't talk about. I love that.
We can't. And
the beginners, we're always going to be beginners, and it is a practice. And it's like anything that, we have this mentality that if you're not good at it, you just shouldn't do it. But it's like you have to start somewhere. And if you don't start, it's not going to happen.
The hardest starting.
Yeah.
So that's what
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for saying that you have done harm and that you have, because I think that normalizing that nobody, even someone who has all of your experience and academic background and everything, it's just going to happen like that.
Fuck up.
Yeah. As humans, that's what we do.
That's it.
The best thing is if we learn from it and change from that. It's not avoiding making a mistake. It's making sure that you don't continue to do that harm.
Yeah. And I think when we extend ourselves that kind of grace, Kate, we can extend it to others.
I agree. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and that's on us. That's on us.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know you're working on launching an academic career mentorship program. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was put on pause for the last few months as life happens. But I think that it's all kind of coming from the same place, what we talked about here in the anti-racism stuff, but aligned with my values. And then I just came out of being a student, and so I give a shit. I just do. And I think academia is a really impossibly lonely, exciting, but really challenging space on a good day. And I think that in a pandemic circumstance, all of that has been exacerbated.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a younger brother. So it's all kind of intertwined with that. But I think that also, I know I wrote this in my bio, but sharing knowledge is a responsibility I really don't take lightly. And so I have all of this knowledge, from going through the academic experience and completing my master's and all of these things. And reciprocity matters, giving back matters to me. And so this is one way that I thought was the most accessible for me. I'm in a full-time job, so I thought this was something that I could do for the right now, and make some kind of impact.
No, I love that. I can't wait to see what you do with that. And I probably will be looking for mentorship from you as well. What is something that not many people know about you?
This question. This question is hard. I was trying to think. I mean, I'm quite a private person, but like, I don't know. I guess so. I'll share like the most recent thing because not a lot of people know it because it literally just happened to me a few days ago. But I was and have been invited to be a panelist at the 2021 Canadian Science Policy Conference in the fall.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so that's a big moment for me, like having decided not to go into my PhD, and it's quite challenging to be a panelist at a conference, like as a young professional, and now as outside of academia. So it feels really good.
Yeah, and does it feel scary, or are you mostly excited?
Mostly excited. I think I have months, so I think I don't know. I think I'll get through the nerves maybe a little bit later, but yeah, it's an honor, and I'm more excited than anything.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thanks for sharing. What advice would you give to someone who wants to be more disruptive in their lives?
I mean, I think like, to kind of tie it all together with everything that I said here tonight, I think I would tell them like it's your responsibility to get to know yourself. So like, what are you about? What are your values? And then I would say like get really clear on why disruption matters to you and to your work. Mm-hmm. Because I think the why matters.
Yeah.
I actually don't think people think critically enough about the why.
Yeah. Or about themselves.
Or about themselves. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think in that way we're all called, Kate, to do something. And I know you feel this too. I mean, I know you've been through several different professions and you made a big 180. But I think that we're all called to do something or some things in the plural while we are in this element form. So it's our responsibility to find that and to live it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I love that. I completely agree. I think it's really, I love how everything that you've said really ties into looking into yourself and doing that work. Because, coaching is all about that, is figuring out your why and what are we doing here and how do we make an impact. And so I thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for the openness to share it with us and for joining me tonight. And, I love what you're doing. I love you and your energy and everything. So where would be the best place? I'll put it in the notes too, but for people to reach out to you, what is the best way to get you if someone wants to talk more after?
Yeah. Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much. And I love you too. I love this DisruptHer series. I love the way that you're solidifying your coaching business through disruption.
Thank you.
Yeah, your evolution has, like, in a few short months has been beautiful to witness. So, so yeah, getting in touch with me is probably best via my Gmail account.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm open to conversations. I think I didn't, necessarily, maybe this didn't come through fully, but I really don't think that we're meant to do this work alone. And I know that it can be isolating and it can be scary as a white person that wants to do good things. So yeah, I'd like to have a conversation.
I love that. Let's not do it alone. Let's not.
Let's because that's it though, right? Like this is also part of the structures of white supremacy that we live under. Like that's a part of the neoliberalism, right? Want us to do it alone, that you can achieve anything with no one's help. Like, we all need community. We are all in community. Like my ideas, everything that I brought here today didn't come out of nowhere. It comes from, like, it's situated in various places. People taught me. I was in rooms with really smart people that I absorbed information. Like this comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
So many places. And so I think, I mean, I wouldn't be here, you know, doing this with you, any of my achievements up until now, without community. So we do actually need each other desperately. And I think that this pandemic has exacerbated that.
I agree. I completely agree. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. And I really look forward to continuing our conversation and hopefully bringing it to the world in a different way.
Yes. I look forward.
So I'm going to put your info in the notes, and yes, for anyone who wants to reach out to you. Thank you so much, and have a great Thursday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.